emanations of light, that are love, that are beauty, that is priceless. And so often when we're in these roads, on these treks, this star path of our divine plan, we may pick up some things along the way that look like struggle. We have experiences along the way that look like something is hard. It's not how we planned, it's not how we wanted it. You know, every time that I've gotten up here to share with you something that was in my heart, it was always something that I needed to hear the most. And so there are often times where I'll do a talk and I'll listen to it afterward to listen to what it was I said, because I know whatever it was I needed. And that's because when I'm here, I'm shedding the parts of me that's the ego and the presentation and the lawyer and the judge, and who I am being up here is just one with you, and one with what we all need to have heard and said to nourish our spirits in a profound way. When I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I agonized, and that never works. And I was putting away my dishes, and the story of Jacob struggling with the angel came to mind. Just popped in my head. There's a special place where things pop. It's like a hair pop in my head. And in this story, it's a story from the Bible, from the Old Testament. And there's some history to it. You know, God had promised Abraham that he was going to make him the father of many nations. And he had, you know, there was Abraham and there was Isaac, and he had Jacob and Esau. Well, as you recall from the story, Jacob had swindled his brother Esau out of his birthright and took off fleeing on foot, and had a lot of experiences, and ended up coming back years later with huge flocks and 4 wives and 11 sons and a lot of cattle and property, and he was a rich man and he wanted to come home. But he was worried about Esau because, you know, Esau had caused killing. So he heard Esau had 400 men and was coming his way. So Jacob says, well, so he sends him a whole bunch of gifts and cattle and, you know, to placate him. So, you know, maybe he won't kill me and my family and all my flock if, you know, if I give him some gifts. And Esau sent all the gifts back. So he got really worried. So he sends his family in 2 camps across the river, and he stays on the camp by himself. He figures if Esau's men attack one of the camps, at least half his family will survive. And he separates himself. So as he goes to sleep that night, the Bible says a man came to him, and they start wrestling. And they wrestle all night. And morning's coming, and the man says, let me go, morning is coming. And Jacob realizes that he's been wrestling with an angel all night. And he says, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. Tell me your name. Angel says, I'm not telling you my name. And he touches his hip, and his hip goes out. Jacob's hip goes out, and so he has to let the angel go. And he's holding on. I'm not going to let you go until you bless me, right? So finally, the angel gets away. He gives him the blessing, and he changes his name. He changes his name from Jacob to Israel. And after that, he goes across the river. He meets his brother. Turns out Esau had a reconciliation moment. He must have been listening to us on Sunday, because he has no problem with Jacob. Come on back home. You and your family and your hordes are welcome here. But Jacob decides not to do that. He decides to stake out his land somewhere else. But they do reconcile. It's kind of a long kind of a story, but what struck me about it was how many times in our lives do we struggle with an angel, where we struggle with something that seems like it's so intense, and we fight with it all night. And I've been thinking about, what does that struggle look like? There's some interesting points about that. You know, sometimes there is something that comes up in our lives, and we would rather that not happen. Sometimes in Science of Mind, we think if we're truly spiritual, we will be prosperous, we will have, you know, perfect families, we will be driving red sports cars, we will have the perfect parking spots, and all will be good, right? If we're spiritual and we got it, you know, together, then all will be well in our world. But you know, the reality of it is much different, because we are here having these human experiences in these bodies, in these circumstances, and we're here to actually do growth. So when you think about how does growth occur? Well, when you see a baby chick coming out of its shell, there's struggle involved. It has to exert its muscles. You know, I read about someone who thought they were going to help the bird out and, you know, kind of healed it out. And that bird died because it didn't build the muscles to be able to survive. You think about a seed when it's about to come up. There's a shoot that has to shoot past the borders of that seed. And so often in our spiritual practice, there's something that looks like an obstacle. There's something that looks like grief. There's something that could look like addiction. There's something that looks like that thing that we cannot get past. It looks like pain at times. It looks like disappointment at times. And when we deal with that, we see ourselves struggling with that angel. The thing about struggling with the angel is that Jacob thought that that angel was a man. He thought it was one of Esau's people coming to get him. And oftentimes when we deal with a struggle, you know, there's a struggle at work. There's a struggle with finances. There's a struggle with a relationship. We think it's that other person that we're struggling with. There's no other, though. There's no separation, though. So when we look at it, we're actually struggling with that angel, that divine emanation of spirit that's here to say, I'm going to be a catalyst for you. I'm going to be that grain in the oyster. I'm going to have you make that pearl, that little irritation, which is a spiritual lesson. And once we get in touch with that this is a spiritual lesson, that it's not that person. So often when something isn't going right, we say, oh, that person. We know that's how they are. That's how those people are. That's how that political party is. That's how those people, that's how that candidate is. That's how that boss is. That's how those people from that such and such. We have it that there is a separation and we're struggling against something that's an other. The reality is there is no other. There is only the divine inside of us. The divine may be saying, here's a lesson. I'm going to give you a big one this time. I'm going to throw you all off. Right? You thought you had the job. You thought you had it down. You thought you had, the relationship. You thought you had it together. And then something comes and blows your whole world to pieces. And you're reeling from it saying, I thought God had my back. And the reality is, God always has your back. Because it was always an angel. It was always God. It's all God. And the reality of that is that no matter what it is, God's grace is always sufficient for us. There is never such a thing as losing that battle. Because the God in us and the God in whatever that situation, it's a match. It's a vibrational match. And the only thing that has to do is for us to shift who we are and our relationship to how we look at that thing. We change our outlook. We change it from being, that's my enemy, that's my problem, that's my issue, to being, God's grace is sufficient for me. I am more than a conqueror. I am here. I'm the head and not the tail. I am always protected. God always has my back. There is no such thing. It is not possible for God to defeat itself. It's just not possible. So when I look at that thing, that it's not outside of me, and I know that I have all sufficiency inside of me, knowing the truth of the divine, that everything I need inside of me to transform this situation, to transform my consciousness, to bring in that awareness, all of that is inside of me now. You know, it's really funny because when Jacob thought he was fighting this angel, and he thought he was fighting a human, and he was actually fighting an angel, and he said, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. Right? And I always thought that was funny, because he already had the blessing. Remember at the beginning of the story, I told you that his grandfather Abraham had already been promised that his seed was going to be greater than the sands of the sea, the grains of sand, right? I mean, you're going to be a lot of folks, right? You're so blessed, it's beyond your comprehension. Generationally, he had that coming already. It was his. But he's holding on to this angel saying, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. There are two ways of looking at that. On one hand, when we are in that situation where we're looking at that thing, that spirit lesson, that thing that feels hard, that thing that feels like grief, we can not let go until we get what that spiritual lesson is. Not give up. Not let it go. I'm not giving up until you bless me. But here's the thing. The blessing was always ours. It's never coming from somewhere. It was always here. So what we have to not let go of is our awareness and our consciousness that it was always ours. The only thing that has to shift is not the circumstance. The only thing that has to shift is our awareness and our consciousness that Spirit is divine and working through us in an infinite and a miraculous way. And there is absolutely nothing that exists in the universe that can change that for us. Because that is the inherent truth of who we are. That we are blessed beyond measure. That what we have in our minds as the gift, as the blessing, is a divine seed telling you that that is what you are planting and that is what is coming up. If we are requesting divine love has been planted in our heart by Spirit, and divine love will come up. The only thing we shift is our consciousness and our absolute awareness and our absolute faith and knowing that that is ours right now. And then we, as Reverend Martha had put in the reading, we know that there is no difference. We know that there seems to be a difference between what's occurring in the material physical world and what's happening inside of us. But that is a temporary situation. That's as temporary as the clothes you have on today. That's as temporary as the dirt on your face right now. That's as temporary as the lipstick I have going on right now. Kylie Jenner, nonetheless. We know that these are temporary situations and that they change based on what we say and who we are. And that is one of the most fundamental beliefs that we have in Science of Mind, is knowing who we are, knowing that it's already ours. It's so funny because for years, I never understood the whole thing about the angel touching him on the hip and the hip going out. He walks with a limp for his life because the angel touched him on his hip. When he says, I won't let you go unless you bless me, and the angel touches him and his hip goes out. And I was like, why would God do that? One of the things that I thought was interesting is that there are so many times when we hold on to the struggle. We hold on to the energy of that struggle so long, we make ourselves sick. You start looking at the energy of like what happens when you're upset and you have so much anger and rage and you're carrying around this thing. And then, suddenly you start having irritable bowel syndrome, right? Or, someone, you're like, oh, they make me sick, and you're doing this, and next thing you know, you have a headache. We start looking at this connection between our body and our spirit. And when we hold on to the struggle, when we don't realize that we are absolutely in the most important thing we can do in this struggle is be in a place of surrender. Let go, accept, let go, let God, and let Spirit move. But we hold on. The ego, not that it's a bad thing, but it's holding on. This is my struggle. I got this down, right? It's so funny because I realized at this week, when I have stories about what a horrible life I had. And what was really interesting was I remember being a young child and making up that I was going to be the heroine of my story. So if something really horrible happened, in my mind, like I actively would say, what would be really extraordinary for my heroine to do so that she would win? I'd say, oh, she needs to go to law school. Oh, she had a custody battle, she should become a lawyer and kick every man's butt in family law, right? Those are the kind of things that I thought of and did. And I was like, heroine, right here, and I will regale you with my heroine stories. And what I realized just last night, was that's me holding on to the struggle. That's me holding on to an outdated story that no longer serves me. That's me holding on to something that even though I think I come up in the end, the thing about a heroine story is there's always a villain, there's a victim, there's a martyr, da-da-da-da-da. There's a whole lot of embedded making people wrong under there. There's a whole lot of, non-forgiveness, lack of reconciliation, because you can't be a hero unless you have a bad guy. And so by giving up myself as being the hero, there was a story I've been telling about the circumstances of my daughter's birth for, my daughter's 22 years old, and I'm still telling that story. I told Annette last night I'm retiring that story. I just decided I'm never telling that story again. Never. And I've made my commitment, my word, I'm not telling that story again. Why? Because I'm holding on to an outdated struggle. And when I'm holding on to that outdated struggle, I'm tainting my spirit, my physical being. I walk around with the bum hip for life because I held on to a perceived struggle. Because Jacob didn't have to hold on to that struggle, except you bless me, because he was already blessed. And so how many times do we do that? Where we hold on, and we hold on, and we hold on, wondering, when are we going to win this struggle? See, the thing isn't believing that their transformation is possible. It's really not about what you believe at all. It's about what you're willing to experience. It's about our experience of God. It's about our experience of the divine. It's about our experience of getting into that space of meditation, getting into that space of in our own spirit, where we know that there is no separation, where we know that forgiveness is effortless because there's nothing to forgive, because there's no space between you and me. There's no difference between you and me. It's that space where Esau comes and says, there's nothing to forgive, come on home. That is about experience. It's not a head conversation. It's a heart conversation. It's a spirit conversation. And once we have that experience, once we deal with that struggle that seemed so insurmountable, that pain seems so overwhelming, that obstacle, I've been trying to overcome this one thing for so long that I think it's real. Once we stop relating to the struggle and start relating to who we are inside, knowing the truth about us, knowing that there is no such thing as God beating God, knowing that the divine plan for my life is in absolute congruence with my path, knowing that I may be dealing with this irritation oyster thing, knowing I may be in the process of breaking out of the shell, knowing that I may be neutralizing pain and grief, knowing all of that, and still knowing the truth, the absolute truth about God, which is the absolute truth about me, is that there is limitless possibility, that there is limitless love, that there is limitless abundance, that there is unqualified health, that all of these things are a part of who I am as a spirit being. When I know this for sure, when I come out on the other side of that, having overcome, my name changes. As Reverend Martha pointed out, I'm no longer called Jacob. I'm called Israel, the father of many nations. I come out on the other side, transformed at a level, in a way that is unprecedented and unexpected even by me. I come out on the other side, not just a winner, not just a conqueror, but a transcender. And the most important thing to remember is, why do we do this? You know, we go through this spiritual exercise for what? Why do we even do it? We don't do it for the sports cars and the parking spots. We don't do it just to manifest. Manifesting is a part of what we're talking about. But the ultimate goal, as we read when we were reading the Joel Goldsmith book, The Power of Healing, who we are being is what it is. That alignment, that absolute, that juicy alignment with Spirit. I may be someone who exudes wealth, but I exude wealth, but the most important thing is the wealth that I have is on the inside of me. I've got gold coins in my spirit. I've got that powerful connection with the divine. I've got that direct pipeline to the absolute immanence of everything that is good, that is high, that is holy. And the rest of it, it's all in exercise. We work it out. You know, one of the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all its righteousness, and all this will be added to you. And so many times we go after the all this being added to you stuff, and not the seek ye first the kingdom part. And seeking first the kingdom has everything to do with us taking on the big stuff, having the struggle, and then giving up the struggle, and emerging on the other side, transformed, triumphant, better, higher, deeper than we ever thought we could ever be. And once we do that, we can never go back to who we were before. We can never go back to our own home, our own comfort zones. We can never go back. We are forever transformed and changed. So when we start thinking about struggle, it is a blessing. It is a blessing. It is the opportunity for us to take on these soul development lessons that we came in this lifetime to take on. And it is an absolute blessing.